I was staring at my computer monitor when the announcement came through. Isabel Kerrigan, our 23-year-old summer intern who'd been with the company for exactly 11 weeks, was receiving the quarterly performance bonus. My quarterly performance bonus, $72,000 that should have been mine after I'd shattered every sales target they'd set for me this year. The conference room felt suffocating as Division Head Gregory Thurston explained how Isabel had shown exceptional promise and innovative thinking that deserved immediate recognition. I watched her sit there, hands folded, looking genuinely surprised but pleased. She had no idea what was happening. None of us did, really, except for Gregory. I'd worked at this major technology consulting firm for 4 years. 4 years of staying late, taking weekend calls from frantic clients, and turning around impossible projects that nobody else wanted to touch. I'd brought in 6 new enterprise accounts this quarter alone, each worth more than Isabel made in a year. The bonus was supposed to be automatic for anyone who exceeded their annual targets by more than 30%. I'd exceeded mine by 68%. But there I sat, watching someone else collect my reward, while Gregory painted this picture of meritocracy and fresh perspectives. The worst part wasn't even the money, though $72,000 would have meant finally paying off my student loans and maybe taking my first real vacation in 3 years. The worst part was how carefully orchestrated this felt, how prepared Gregory seemed with his explanations about investing in tomorrow's leaders. After the meeting, I lingered near the elevator bank. Isabel approached me with genuine concern written across her face. "Celine, I hope you know I had no idea about any of this," she said quietly. "I feel terrible that you didn't get recognized too. You've been so generous with your time, teaching me everything." I looked at her earnest expression and felt something shift inside me. She really didn't know. She wasn't part of some conspiracy. She was just a young woman who'd gotten caught up in something much bigger than herself. "Congratulations, Isabel," I told her, meaning it more than she could have understood. "You absolutely deserve recognition for your hard work." That evening, I did something I rarely do anymore. I called my sister Erin. "They gave away your bonus?" Erin's voice crackled through the speaker as I paced around my apartment. "Celine, that's insane. Can't you file a complaint with HR?" "It's more complicated than that," I said, staring out at the city skyline. "I think I know why this happened." During my first week training Isabel, she'd mentioned growing up in Millbrook Falls, population 8,000. It struck me as an unusual place to be from, so remote that I'd never heard of it. Then, 2 weeks ago, I'd overheard Gregory on a personal call talking about visiting his mother in Millbrook Falls for her birthday. Same tiny town, same impossible coincidence. I'd started paying attention after that. Gregory and Isabel had a familiarity that went beyond professional mentorship. They shared inside jokes about local restaurants and knew the same handful of families. When I casually asked Isabel about her hometown connections, she mentioned that her family had known the Thurston family forever, Gregory's family. The bonus wasn't about performance metrics or innovation. It was about hometown loyalty wrapped up in corporate language. Before I dive deeper into what happened next, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you're listening from? Because I want to know where my story is, reaching people who understand what it feels like to work so hard only to watch connections matter more than competence. And please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification because this story gets so much more intense, and I promise you've never heard anything like what I did next. The thing about discovering favoritism is that it changes how you see everything. Every interaction, every decision, every casual conversation suddenly has layers you missed before. I spent the next few days watching Gregory and Isabel together, and the patterns became impossible to ignore. He gave her the easiest client accounts to manage. He praised her for suggestions that other team members had made weeks earlier. He shielded her from the demanding customers and complex technical challenges that the rest of us handled routinely. She was being set up to succeed in ways she couldn't even recognize. But here's what Gregory didn't anticipate. I'm not someone who explodes when I'm angry. I don't storm into HR offices or send company-wide emails exposing unfairness. I've learned that the most devastating responses often look like kindness from the outside. I started with Isabel herself. "I've been thinking about your development." I told her the following Monday, perching on the edge of her workspace. "You're clearly management material, and I think you could benefit from some advanced training." Her face lit up immediately. "Really? I'd love that, Celine. You're honestly the smartest person on this whole team." Over the next week, I began what I called Isabel's accelerated learning program. I taught her our most sophisticated client management techniques, the complex analytical frameworks that took me 2 years to master, and the intricate technical specifications that even senior consultants struggled with. I showed her how to build comprehensive project timelines that accounted for every possible variable. I explained the nuanced relationship dynamics between different departments within our biggest client organizations. I walked her through advanced negotiation tactics that required deep industry knowledge and years of relationship-building experience. Isabel absorbed everything eagerly, taking detailed notes and asking thoughtful questions. She had genuine intelligence and impressive determination. Under normal circumstances, she might have developed into an excellent consultant given proper time and mentorship. But these weren't normal circumstances. Gregory had decided she was ready for major responsibilities immediately, based not on her actual capabilities, but on his personal affection for her family. I began recommending Isabel for increasingly complex assignments. When a demanding client requested someone to handle their software integration project, I suggested Isabel would be perfect for the challenge. When we needed someone to present our quarterly analysis to the executive board, I proposed that Isabel had exactly the fresh perspective they were looking for. Gregory approved every recommendation enthusiastically. He was so pleased to see his protégé receiving opportunities that he never questioned whether she was actually prepared for them. Meanwhile, I made another strategic adjustment to my own work habits. For 4 years, I'd been the person who stayed late to fix problems that emerged after hours. I'd taken calls during weekend family gatherings and answered urgent emails while sitting in restaurants. I'd volunteered for overtime projects, covered for colleagues during their vacations, and absorbed extra responsibilities whenever departments were understaffed. I'd become so reliable that my contributions had become invisible. Management assumed I would always be available, always willing to handle whatever crisis emerged, always capable of pulling solutions out of nowhere when everything else failed. I decided to test that assumption. I started leaving the office at exactly 5:30. When weekend emergencies arose, I responded Monday morning with apologies about being unreachable. When colleagues asked me to cover additional projects, I politely explained that my current workload was already quite full. I wasn't being defiant or obviously uncooperative. I was simply establishing the boundaries that healthy employees are supposed to maintain. The boundaries that everyone else had always maintained while I carried the extra weight. The effects became apparent within days. Client calls that I usually handled went to voicemail. Technical problems that I normally resolved festered over weekends. Project timelines that depended on my weekend availability began slipping. The seamless operation that everyone had taken for granted started developing obvious cracks. At the same time, Isabel was discovering the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. The sophisticated techniques I'd taught her required institutional memory and relationship capital that she simply hadn't had time to develop. The complex projects she'd been assigned demanded judgment calls that only came from experience she didn't possess. Her presentations began showing strain. She could articulate the frameworks I'd taught her, but she struggled to adapt them when clients asked unexpected questions. She understood the analytical models conceptually, but she couldn't troubleshoot when the data didn't fit standard patterns. I watched this unfold with careful attention but no intervention. When Isabel approached me looking overwhelmed, I offered encouraging words and general support. When she asked for specific help with particular challenges, I reminded her that learning to solve difficult problems independently was an essential skill for senior consultants. "You're incredibly capable, Isabel," I told her sincerely. "I have complete confidence that you'll figure out the best approach." Gregory began looking increasingly concerned as small problems accumulated into larger issues. Projects that should have run smoothly hit unexpected complications. Clients who had been satisfied started expressing frustration about delayed responses and incomplete solutions. The division's reputation for seamless service began showing wear. He approached me during the 3rd week with barely concealed desperation. Celine, I know you've been maintaining better work-life balance lately, which is admirable, he said carefully. But we're facing some urgent situations that could really benefit from your expertise. I listened thoughtfully to his list of mounting crises. Each one was a problem I would have solved automatically in the past, working whatever hours were necessary to maintain the department's flawless reputation. Those do sound challenging, I agreed. I'm confident the team will find effective solutions. Isabel has been doing such impressive work lately. Gregory's expression tightened slightly. Isabel is still developing her skills. These situations require someone with more experience. I understand your concern, I replied. Unfortunately, I'm completely committed to my current projects for the next several weeks. Perhaps you could consider bringing in external consultants for the additional capacity. External consultants would cost the company roughly 3 times my salary for the same work. Gregory knew this as well as I did. That afternoon, I received a call that changed everything. Diana Westfield from Apex Strategic Solutions had been trying to reach me for months about a senior consultant position. I'd been politely declining her approaches because I valued stability over opportunity. This time, I listened carefully to her offer. The base salary was 40% higher than my current compensation. The bonus structure was transparent and merit-based, with clear performance metrics. The company culture emphasized professional development and work-life balance. Most importantly, they specialized in exactly the type of complex technical consulting that I found most intellectually engaging. I'm very interested, I told Diana. How quickly could we move forward with this conversation? We could have you in for interviews this week, she replied immediately. I've been hoping to connect with you for so long that I'd be willing to expedite our entire process. I scheduled the interviews for Thursday and Friday, using personal days that I'd accumulated but never taken. The process exceeded my expectations completely. Apex Strategic Solutions had built exactly the kind of environment I'd always wished my current company could become. By Friday afternoon, they offered me a position that included a $20,000 signing bonus, 60% salary increase, and equity participation that could be worth significantly more than money over time. I asked for the weekend to consider their offer, knowing I'd already made my decision. Monday morning, I arrived at the office with a resignation letter in my bag and a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. Gregory intercepted me before I reached my desk. Celine, we need to talk, he said urgently. Several major clients have expressed concerns about service quality lately. I think we need to reassess some of our recent project assignments. He was finally ready to acknowledge that his golden intern wasn't prepared for the responsibilities he'd given her. But instead of admitting his mistake directly, he wanted me to quietly fix the problems without discussion or recognition. I looked at him standing there, desperate for me to rescue the situation he'd created through his favoritism, and I felt the final piece of my plan sliding into place. Gregory, I appreciate you bringing these concerns to my attention, I said calmly. I think this conversation is perfectly timed, actually. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying all morning. I wanted to let you know that I'll be transitioning to a new opportunity. This is my formal resignation letter. My last day will be 2 weeks from today. The color drained from Gregory's face as he stared at the envelope like it contained a bomb. Celine, this timing is really difficult, he stammered. Can we discuss what it would take to retain you? I'm sure we can address any concerns you might have about compensation or advancement opportunities. I handed him the resignation letter with a genuine smile. I'm grateful for everything I've learned here, Gregory. This decision isn't about dissatisfaction. Sometimes, new challenges just align perfectly with your professional goals. He opened the letter immediately, scanning it with growing panic. You're giving exactly the minimum required notice during our busiest quarter, he said, looking up at me. Is there any flexibility on your start date with the new company? Unfortunately, no. They need someone to begin immediately on a time-sensitive project that matches my expertise perfectly. This was completely true. Apex Strategic Solutions had a major client implementation beginning in 3 weeks that required exactly my skill set. Diana had been thrilled when I'd accepted their offer with such a quick turnaround. Gregory was clearly calculating the impossibility of his situation. Training a replacement for my responsibilities would take months, assuming he could find someone with comparable experience willing to work at my current salary level. The ongoing client crises needed immediate attention from someone who understood both the technical requirements and the relationship dynamics involved. Most importantly, he was realizing that his decision to give my bonus to Isabel had created the exact circumstances that made my departure so devastating. "Celine, I want to be completely transparent with you," he said, lowering his voice. "I think there may have been some miscommunication about the quarterly bonus allocation. I'd like to revisit that decision and ensure you receive appropriate recognition for your contributions." I looked at him with genuine sympathy. "Gregory, I truly appreciate that gesture, but my decision isn't connected to the bonus situation. Isabel absolutely deserved that recognition, and I'm happy she received it." This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when he would understand that his attempt to fix the money wouldn't repair the underlying problem. "Sometimes the best opportunities come from unexpected timing," I continued. "I'm actually grateful that everything worked out exactly as it did." Over the next 2 weeks, I watched the full scope of my departure's impact unfold, like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Isabel approached me on my third to last day, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. "Celine, I need to ask you something honestly," she said. "Did you know this would happen when you started teaching me those advanced techniques?" I considered her question carefully. Isabel had grown significantly over the past month, even as she'd struggled. The pressure had revealed her actual capabilities and limitations in ways that gentle development never could have. "I knew you were intelligent enough to handle complex challenges," I told her truthfully. "I also knew you'd need to discover your own approaches to solving difficult problems." She nodded slowly. "I think I understand now why you've been so successful here. It's not just about knowing the right techniques. It's about having the experience to know when and how to apply them." "Exactly. And now you're building that experience much faster than you would have otherwise." Isabel had indeed learned more in 4 weeks than she probably would have in 6 months of gradual development. The intensity had been overwhelming, but it had also shown her exactly what skills she needed to develop and how much work lay ahead of her. "I'm going to ask Gregory to adjust my responsibilities," she said. "I think I was promoted too quickly, and I want to make sure I'm actually ready before I take on anything this complex again." I felt genuine pride watching her take ownership of her development. She'd transformed from someone who didn't know what she didn't know into someone who could accurately assess her own capabilities. "That sounds like excellent judgment," I told her. Meanwhile, the operational impacts of my departure were becoming impossible to ignore. The client who'd been waiting for their software integration solution had threatened to terminate their contract unless they received immediate resolution. The executive board presentation that Isabel had been assigned was postponed twice because nobody else could compile the necessary analysis in time. Most significantly, 3 other senior consultants had approached Gregory, requesting salary discussions. My departure had prompted them to evaluate their own compensation and workload balance. They'd started wondering why they'd been accepting below-market salaries while handling above-average responsibilities. Gregory found himself facing not just the loss of his most productive team member, but a potential exodus of experienced staff who were suddenly questioning the department's compensation structure. On my final Friday, Gregory requested a private meeting. "Celine, I want you to know that I recognize the mistakes I made," he said. "The bonus decision was influenced by factors that shouldn't have been relevant. You deserved that recognition, and I let personal considerations cloud my professional judgment." I appreciated his honesty more than he probably realized. "I respect you for acknowledging that, Gregory. Those kinds of decisions are difficult, and I understand the pressures you face." "Is there anything I can do to change your mind about leaving?" he asked. "A counteroffer, additional responsibilities, a commitment to more transparent recognition processes?" I considered how to respond. Gregory was genuinely trying to make amends, but he was also discovering the consequences of prioritizing favoritism over competence. "I think this transition is beneficial for everyone involved," I said finally. "You'll have the opportunity to restructure the team in ways that better support long-term success. Isabel will be able to develop her skills at a more sustainable pace, and I'll be taking on challenges that align perfectly with my professional goals." Can I ask where you're going? Apex Strategic Solutions. They specialize in the complex technical consulting that I find most engaging. Gregory's expression shifted to something approaching admiration mixed with regret. They're our biggest competitor in the enterprise consulting space, he said quietly. You'll be working on exactly the types of projects that you've always handled best here. That's exactly why the opportunity was so appealing. What Gregory didn't know was that Diana had been recruiting me specifically because Apex had been losing potential clients to our company. My reputation in the industry was strong enough that several enterprise customers had chosen our firm primarily because they wanted to work with me personally. Now those relationships would be transitioning to Apex along with my departure, not through any deliberate client poaching, but through the natural movement that happens when trusted consultants change firms. The irony was perfect. Gregory's decision to give my bonus to someone else had prompted my departure, which would ultimately cost his company far more than $72,000 in lost revenue and competitive disadvantage. On my last day, Isabel organized a small farewell gathering. The entire team attended, including Gregory, who looked genuinely sad to see me leave. Celine has been the backbone of this department, he announced to the group. Her professionalism, expertise, and mentorship have contributed to every success we've achieved over the past 4 years. I looked around the room at colleagues who had become friends, at Isabel, who had grown so much in such a short time, and at Gregory, who was finally understanding the cost of his choices. Thank you all for making this such a meaningful experience, I said. I'm excited to see how everyone continues growing and achieving amazing things. 3 months later, I received a LinkedIn message from Isabel. She'd been promoted to a senior consultant position, but with appropriate preparation and support this time. She'd also been featured in the company newsletter for developing an innovative client training program. I wanted to thank you for pushing me to grow faster than I thought possible, she wrote. I know those weeks were overwhelming, but I learned more about myself and my capabilities than I would have in years of gradual development. I hope we can collaborate again someday. Gregory had reached out as well, asking if I'd be willing to provide consulting services for specific projects where our expertise might complement each other. His department had recovered from my departure, but they'd restructured their approach to talent development and compensation to prevent similar situations. As for me, Apex Strategic Solutions exceeded every expectation I'd had. The work was intellectually stimulating, the culture genuinely supported professional growth, and the compensation reflected the value I brought to complex client challenges. Most importantly, I'd learned something crucial about my own worth. For years, I'd been so focused on proving myself through extra effort and uncomplaining reliability that I'd become undervalued and taken for granted. The bonus situation had forced me to recognize that my contributions were significant enough to command respect and appropriate recognition. The revenge wasn't about destroying anyone or causing permanent damage. It was about stepping away from a situation where my value wasn't recognized and allowing natural consequences to demonstrate what that value actually was. Gregory learned that favoritism creates exactly the kind of instability that strong performers won't tolerate. Isabel learned to assess her own readiness before accepting responsibilities beyond her current capabilities. The department learned to structure compensation and recognition systems that actually reflected merit rather than personal relationships. I learned that sometimes the most powerful response to unfairness isn't fighting against it, but simply refusing to enable it anymore. The $72,000 bonus that started this whole situation turned out to be the cheapest lesson Gregory's department ever received about the cost of losing their most valuable contributors. And honestly, watching everything unfold exactly as I'd anticipated was more satisfying than any amount of money could have been. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt undervalued or overlooked despite your contributions, please hit the like button and share your own experiences in the comments. Sometimes we need to hear that other people understand what it feels like to watch connections matter more than competence. Subscribe for more stories about finding your worth and refusing to accept less than you deserve, because your value doesn't depend on other people recognizing it. You get to decide when enough is enough.